Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, canammissing project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Our website, canammissing.com, and there you can get all of our Missing 411 books. Our documentaries, which there are two, are free on YouTube Movies right now. Thanks for being here. And there's a lot going on in the world. And just in the last 2 weeks, seems like things have busted loose. I've gotten a ton of emails from sheriffs, park rangers, some really interesting stuff going on. It seems like something happened and the doors opened and all of a sudden everyone was made aware of our work, which is good. And they're flooding in with a lot of information, and I'm greatly appreciated. I think what we'll do today is we will get right into the letters, and there are some interesting ones to say the least. So Dave, a year ago a coworker sent me a link to your Yahoo, it's not a Yahoo, but sent a link to your video channel, and I started watching movies and weekly recordings. I also ordered your entire book set and started reading all of them at once. The reason was I had a strange experience when I was young. When I was 17 or 18, back in 79 or 80 in Maplewood, Minnesota, I found myself dropped into the snow in the middle of the road, several blocks from my home in front of a lake. Strange thing was I had no boots on. I was wearing a t-shirt, blue Levi's and cotton socks, and my winter parka. The first thing I did was feel my feet. They were warm and dry, as were my pants. And my hands were dry and warm as well. But I was on my hands and knees in the middle of the road in a foot of snow. I was in shock, wondering how I got there. Snow was still coming down hard and thick, and I was under a street light. I looked at the houses I was next to, and I recognized them because one has an unusual staircase. Then I looked up and ran towards my home and didn't see any tracks in the snow, and it was a foot deep. So I leapt to my feet and ran fast up the hill, over the crest and down the other side, about 3 or 4 blocks to my parents' house. My feet got cold and wet really fast. My boots were in the middle of the street in the snow, one upright, one tipped sideways. I grabbed them and ran inside. What happened earlier was a friend had called me and asked me to stop over at the neighbor's who was babysitting across the street. So I grabbed my boots and parka because it was late fall and cold out and walked across. I don't recall it was snowing at the time. He proceeded to share a neighbor's booze with me, asked if I thought I could drink a whole glass, about the size of her 8 or 10 ounce size. Not sure why I did it, but I slammed it and then said I should head home. I walked outside, threw up on the grass, and things went foggy after that. I always assumed that I crawled 3 or 4 blocks down the road, but then I kept asking myself, why were my socks dry, my hands warm, my feet warm? If you crawl 3 or 4 city blocks in the snow, you would have cold feet and be wet. And there were no tracks, but there should have been. Back then, there was no traffic after 10 o'clock at night. No stores were open, so nobody was on the road. And driving in that much snow would have been tough. Interesting story. I sent him back a request for more information, asking him, well, did you tell your parents about this? And what did they say? And was this the first time that happened? What's your nationality? Where are your parents from? Didn't hear back yet. So we'll wait and see. A lot of these stories that you hear about involve young people that have been drinking. And that seems to be a center post of a lot of this type of activity. Now, I know a lot of you will say, well, maybe your friend fed you some kind of narcotic cocktail that knocked you out. But the questions about how he got to that location in the street, why he wasn't frozen stiff, etc., those are good questions. But my first inclination would say, I think your buddy was messing with you, but maybe not. Dear Dave, I just finished watching your YouTube episode honoring Ben's birthday, and I wanted to write to you while my thoughts are fresh in my mind. I've written before about visual migraines and even attended the Gatlinburg conference where I was the woman who came up to the microphone to ask you a question. I've been a subscriber to your channel since the mid-2020, faithful viewer, and I own several of your books. Thank you very much. First, let me convey my sorrow for your loss. Ben, a sentiment I have felt from the time I first learned about your loss, but have hesitated in writing to you about it, thinking you were too overwhelmed with messages from others. When you talk to your viewers on your channel, it's like having a one-on-one conversation with us. I felt that more so today when I watched your tribute to Ben's life than any other time. I've always been a one-on-one person, and I'm not as comfortable talking with a group of people. So I really felt your pain as you were sitting across from each other at the table talking. I heard every word you said and appreciate how you shared all the wonderful details of his accomplishments. You're blessed to have this outlet for yourself to express your thoughts and grief, and don't ever feel bad about the pain you're feeling or the amount of grief you're experiencing. Give yourself some time to grieve. Only when you allow yourself to grieve deeply will you begin to heal. A year or two of deep grief is not unreasonable. As your grief counselor told you, it may never leave you, which in and of itself sounds depressing. However, it has been my experience after losing a family member that eventually each day it will get a little easier. Rest assured, you are the best father Ben could have asked for. You did everything you knew to do. You loved him, and you let him know that. You supported him in all of his life's choices, and your love and support were not wasted on him. I don't think they were. I think Ben got it. I hope he did. Try to consider the bigger picture, and there's a much larger one here. What you have experienced may have such considerable and larger implications in life that you cannot now comprehend. Consider the timing of the events in your life and in Ben's. The making of the movies, the starting of the YouTube channel, the pandemic, a series of political events, all these things making it ever so important to have someone like you talking to America about mental health, grief, loss, the facts, missing people. But even more important, an outlet for yourself to express. Perhaps this is your saving grace. Also know that I'm praying for you, and I have been since I learned about Ben's death. I believe in the power of prayer. I hold my hand out to you on the TV and prayer to God to heal you and bless you and make these days easier, to comfort you, to wrap his loving arms around you. Don't let the naysayers influence what you talk about. It takes a lot of nerve for anyone to criticize what you do on your channel. You are a man of excellence. It is evident in all you do. Continue to let your heart and mind be your guide, and you won't go wrong. Thank you for those very, very comforting words. Like I've said before, being a parent is the toughest job in the world. After my wife left me, it was a lot of staring at four walls, thinking, what in the heck am I supposed to do? There's a lot of power in the couple in a marriage. And I truly believe that balance of husband and wife is important. Different perspectives, different outlooks, different ways you were raised. A woman may think one way and a man may think another, and somewhere in the middle is the right way. So I really valued that. It's hard to see a family go through a divorce. It's one of the worst times in my life, bar none. And if it was bad for me, then darn, I know it was horrible for the kids. And for that, I wish I could have changed it. I wish I could have. I tried. And it didn't work. But next letter. First, thanks for staying in the battle, even when dealing with your own deep loss. May the Lord be with you and his spirit bring comfort to you as the days go by. I've had at least 4 abductions and are attempted ones, along with some fairly bizarre paranormal experiences, and won't go into all of them. I'm 60 years old and a retired special education teacher after 37 years. Well, let me salute you. That is a job of a lifetime that takes an enormous amount of patience. Teachers are a special breed, but special education teachers, you're like the top of the heap, in my opinion, for what you can do. Thank you. My bizarre experiences began when I was young, perhaps as early as 2, when I vividly remember peeing blood. I remember my mom telling me that I would say, "Even scare me to death." When I was around 5 years old, I remember feeling a horrible sense of dread and a feeling of heaviness. Everything was much more amplified in regards to even the smallest of sounds. Even a small touch sounded like a horrendous noise. This lasted for a few weeks and came without warning, usually at my grandmother's house where we had played with a Ouija board. Another time at grandmother's house, I was napping on my grandfather's bed and was suddenly paralyzed and couldn't move anything but my eyes. I had no recollections after that. Perhaps I was 9 then. The next one will sound absolutely insane, but I was going to share anyway. At around the age of 13, I began a typical nocturnal emissions that boys experience. One afternoon while on the couch at my parents' house, I was asleep. I think, but remember being in a small, dark and foggy room with lots of people in it. There was a woman who was hardly dressed, and she was adjuring me to climb her leg, which I did, and I remember the sensations of how real it felt. She soon had me to the point of interesting, and I awoke with something. The others in the room were apparently involved in the similar activities that I could see and hear them. Sounds totally odd and strange. I know, but that's the truth. On top of that, I didn't even know what a female felt like until that bizarre experience. I think I was 14. I was watching a TV program in my room one night and suddenly was paralyzed. I felt absolutely terror, and I heard something shuffle on the floor behind me. Something then tugged at my covers, and the terror was so extreme I knew I would die. Instead, I felt as though I was sucked downward and out of my body through the mattress. Next thing I see is the popcorn ceiling a few inches from my face. I'm able to look down and see my body on my bed. In the next moment, I'm floating towards some kind of podium, for lack of a better description, in the middle of a dim room with windows. It's dark outside. As I approach and then reach the podium, I suddenly feel like I'm free falling. I still felt a sense of paralysis, but in my desperation, I screamed out in my mind, "God help me." I claimed faith in Jesus Christ recently. After calling out, I felt like I bounced onto my bed really hard. I got up and ran to tell my dad, and he said, "You just had a nightmare." About 7 years later, while at college, it happened again. All these experiences happened while I was alone. I was watching TV in my dorm room at college and became paralyzed, without warning. Suddenly felt a sense of dread, and then little voices whispering in some other language, perhaps, things I couldn't understand. I began to feel the same sensation of being sucked out of my body, but recall now I had been released from fear and the prior experience by calling out telepathically, "God." So again, I did it in mind, "Jesus, help." Immediately, the experience ended. I could go on, but this is already too long. I believe we're experiencing last days events that Jesus spoke about in Matthew 24 and the other end of prophetic events mentioned in the Bible. May the Lord Jesus be with you and yours, Dave. P.S. You're a man of courage. Fight the good fight and remember, love will win the day even if we lose the faith. Thank you for that. 2 side stories to this. A friend told me one time that he was laying in bed. In fact, I heard this from multiple people. He was laying in bed, just about to sleep, and very near him, he felt like somebody was stepping on the mattress. He felt it kind of give in, he said. Not enough that he was going to fall in that way, but he could feel it, and he felt the steps next to him on the bed. It was either a step or somebody putting an elbow or a hand there. And he said that this happened to him several times during his life. And he said he never had any other sensations of just that, but he was single, nobody else was in the house, and it happened at multiple residences that he lived in. He said he was never really scared, but he knew that something was happening in that room with him at the same time. And then I didn't say this to anybody. I kept the confidence of this friend, but another friend told me a almost identical story. Weren't many things different, except he said that it was right in that phase before you go to sleep. Don't know what could be causing it, but so we'll get into the stories. And there are some really good ones this week. Not that all of mine are good, but so Ben was playing in the U.S. Hockey League in Youngstown, Ohio. And he was scouted by Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And it was their goalie coach, a guy named Nick, who scouted him, went down into the locker room afterwards and said, "Hey, I really like you. And you play good physical defense. It's what we need. And we'd like to invite you down and have a tour of the college." So Ben went down, loved the school, loved the facilities. And I can remember that the first time Ben took me to Miami and gave me the tour of the locker room, and it was phenomenal. I mean, I've been in the Sharks locker room, and I've been in the Sharks training facility, and it's as nice, if not better than that, and I'm not kidding you. When you walk into the facility, they have these giant sliding doors with prophetic statements, championships, and Miami hockey had always been a location where people went that wanted to be winners. And it was an elite organization. To get in there, you knew you had to be pretty darn good. They were always in the top 3 or 4 in the nation up until about 4 years ago. After Ben left, the team had some problems, coaches left, and it hasn't gotten back to that point. But when Ben was there, they were rated number 1 in the nation for several years. Now, why am I talking to you about this? So I'd written a couple books when Ben got into Miami. And when I got there, one of the parents knew who I was, pulled me aside, and he said, "Dave," he goes, I notice you're here for every game." I go, "No, I'm going to be here for every game." And there was a facility called Goggin Ice Center, Goggin. It wasn't a huge arena. And whoever designed that arena was brilliant because every game it was packed. And they had a boosters section. They had a students cheering section. They brought a band in. I can't imagine a better environment to play any sport. It was just great. So anyhow, this parent pulls me aside and says, "Hey, Dave, I know you write about missing people. Did you ever hear about the case here at Miami?" I said, "No." And they started to tell me this story. And man, it really piqued my interest. Because part of one of my books dealt with missing co-eds. And this was right up my alley. So I went to the administration building at the university. And I talked to one of the secretaries, I think, for the dean. And I said, "Do you have a file on a missing student?" She goes, "Oh, yeah. You must mean Ron Tammen." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Come on." She took me to the back and she took out this giant file. And she said, "Yeah, we've had this for many years." And I explained who I was, and I was a parent of Ben, and I'd written some books. I'm a former policeman. She goes, "Hey, no problem. You can sit down right here and take as much time as you want." And I think I came back for 3 days looking through this file. Then I spent another 3 or 4 days at the local library, 3 or 4 days in the community. I came back, I think 2 weeks later for another game, went back to the file. In total, I probably spent 3 weeks looking at this case. The story is, a young man named Ronald Tammen, T-A-M-M-E-N, Jr., 19 years old. And he was going to Miami. And on April 19th, 1953, he was living in a place called Fisher Hall. And Fisher Hall doesn't exist anymore, but it was a dorm, and it was right next to a creek, 4 Mile Creek, and it was multiple stories high. Well, Ron was from a place called Rocky River, Ohio, and he got a varsity letter in 3 sports: track, wrestling, and football. He was an athlete, but he was really smart. He applied to Miami, got in, and he was also a musician, and he played the bass fiddle in a campus band called the Campus Owls, and they played around at different locations in Oxford. So it's kind of confusing because Miami University, you think of Florida, but Miami University is actually in Ohio. It's in a city called Oxford, Ohio. And it's really an isolated place, in essence. You know, it's 20 miles from really any big town. And it's got a real cute little downtown area without a ton of businesses, but just enough to keep you interested. And there was enough to keep Ron's band interested. He was a business admin major, 3.25 GPA, but everyone said he was super smart. Well, he was in his freshman year, and he was given the task of being the freshman hall advisor. People considered him super respectable, honorable, trustworthy, and all-around really good kid. Well, some background. Fisher Hall used to be an insane asylum decades earlier. And then the Navy bought it and turned it into a radio communications repair facility. And then it got turned into a girls' college. And then eventually, when Miami was formed, Miami took it over and made it into this dorm facility. So it had a couple of renditions to it that were pretty interesting. Right now, it was torn down, and there's the Markham Conference Center that is on that property. And there's a hotel that's somewhat attached to it as well. Really nice place. And the players stay at the players who aren't living in close proximity, stay at the Markham Conference Center because the dorms and the facilities don't serve food when all the kids are out of town, but they have to stay because they got hockey. Interesting. Well, like I said, 4 Mile Creek is right next to this facility. When Ron first arrived at college, he immediately made the varsity wrestling team in Miami, which was a huge deal. And it just showed his work ethic. The coaches said that nobody on that team worked harder than him. And folks, if you got somebody in your life, a cousin, daughter, son, there's nothing that coaches admire more than work ethic, because it instills that same effort towards everybody on that team. It makes them all work harder. You love those kind of players. Well, in early April of '53, Ron went to Hamilton, Ohio, probably one of the biggest towns nearby. And he saw a physician, and he said he wanted a blood test. And the physician later said in reports that in his 30 years, nobody's ever asked him or come to him for that. Well, he wouldn't do it because that wasn't something that he did. He sent Ron to a hospital. And Ron did get the blood test, and it came back as O positive. I was at Mercy Hospital. Well, on April 19th, 1953, Ron's band was playing a gig in Oxford. And he came back at about 8:30. And he came into his room, and he found a fish in his bed. Puzzling. He didn't have any enemies. He didn't know why it was there. Thought it was weird. Now, he was one of 2 rooms on the 2nd floor that had a fire escape. His roommate wasn't there. His roommate was at an event at school, but he knew his roommate wouldn't do it, and there was no entryway that he saw in and out of the room. All the doors were locked. So he went to the house mother, got new sheets. She made a comment that night that she thought he looked tired, and he said he was. He says he was going to study for finals and then go to sleep. So he came up, changed the sheets, opened up his psychology book, turned on the light at his desk. And what happened after that? Nobody knows. At about 12:15, his roommate gets home and found the scene I just explained. The lights on, books open. The only thing that are gone is Ron's Mackinac coat. It was storming, blistering wind and snow outside for April, not that unusual. And his keys, his wristwatch, and his wallet were all in the room. His car was still in the parking place. Just he and his coat were gone. What happened? Well, that's a $1 million question. There was a giant search. Everywhere was gone over. Nothing was left untouched. Nothing was found. I've been through 4 Mile Creek. There's water in it. There's fish in it all year. Did the fish come from the creek? I don't know. Well, it was a couple days before the university took the disappearance seriously. And then eventually it became a pretty big deal. And one of the oddest twists I've ever seen, the police chief, a year after this happened, was interviewed about Ron. And the police chief said that the dean of the school never asked for a report, never wanted any formal documentation, nothing. Even though the surrounding communities and the nation were all over this. And his parents. So why wouldn't they want formal inquiry about this? That was puzzling. Now, in August of 1953, about 4 months after Ron disappeared, the head of student housing was at an event in far southern New York, right near the Pennsylvania border. And he was with his wife at a little restaurant, kind of out of the way. And he looks across the dining room and he swears he saw Ron Tammen with 2 other men. He said Ron looked at him and it's like Ron looked right through him, like that deer in the headlights look. The man at housing said he in his mind, he knew exactly what Ron looked like because he was all over this for a long time. And he and his wife walked outside. And he says he wasn't outside more than 2 minutes, and he told his wife, I have to go back in and confront this person. And he went back inside and all 3 were gone. And he said the unusual part was that the restaurant wasn't that big. There weren't that many ways to get in and out, yet he was never there. Years later, Ron's brother, he had 3 siblings. Ron's brother was interviewed in Southern California about him. And the questions always were, did Ron just maybe fall out of school, fall out of life? But he would have contacted family members again. And his brother said, no, he never contacted anyone. He was never seen again. It devastated his family. But think about it. It's almost as though the university had some insider knowledge that Ron was taken, or Ron left, because they didn't want anything report written internally. Odd. Now, Ron came back from an event, probably at a bar. He'd probably been drinking, but nobody said so. He was going to study. It was about 8:30 that he got back. So it was at night. And it was at a dorm. So that night involved travel between a bar and the dorm. And the disappearance occurred at the dorm. Nobody saw him leave that night. Nobody said that the fire escape was used. Nobody heard anyone on the fire escape. But if you think about it, well, weirdly, and I thought about this right from the get-go, that 4 Mile Creek is right there next to the building. And then what's the deal with the fish? I've asked 100 people that question. It has to be related to the disappearance. That's too unusual for that to happen the same night he disappears. Again, he was an athlete, musician, great student, smart kid, very humble, very polite. April 19th, 1953. Miami University, Oxford, Ohio. Ron's had never been found. So that's case number 1. And I should say that I walked around that university for hundreds of hours over 4 years. It's a great place. Great memories. I thought about Ron a lot because those grounds that I walked on were the grounds that he disappeared on. And I knew in my heart that this matched all the rest of the co-eds I had written about in previous books. In fact, in one book, there's a chapter called Missing Co-eds. I wish I knew what happened, but I don't. Next case, October 28th, 1988. Now, 35 years after Ron disappeared. What I want you to remember, if all these cases happened in one location, if they all happen in a very short period of time, even the lowest level intellect could figure out something is going on. You spread things out over 20, 30 years, people retire, people forget, and they don't put the pieces of the puzzle together. The next 2 cases, I want you to pay attention, because I think it should be blatantly obvious to you that something is here. Don't doubt me on this. October 28th, 1988, 1 a.m., between 12:30 and 1 a.m. at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. But before I go on, I want to do Ron Tammen what he is duly deserved. First of all, that's Ron. Really good-looking kid. Athlete, smart. I think he's got a face you're not going to forget. Now, give you the layout of Miami University. This is the dorm where he was at Fisher Hall. It's now called the Markham Hotel. This is 4 Mile Creek right here. And all of this area, I walked it so many times. It gets pretty rural out in the equestrian center, out in this region. I walked up and down this area, and it's almost like you're in a different venue. You can't believe that the campus is so close. This is the ice center, the Goggin Ice Center, where Ben played for 4 years. And a magical, magical place. If you ever have a son or daughter and they're thinking about going there, I'd support it. Probably the most famous person to ever graduate from there, at least in my mind, was Ben Roethlisberger. And yeah, he played for Miami, but it wasn't a great football team back then, but somebody recognized his ability and took him. So anyhow. So October 28th, 1988, right in the University of British Columbia is essentially in downtown Vancouver. Sits on a point out into the ocean. On 3 sides is the ocean. it is an absolutely pristine place. I've been there a few times. Young man by the name of Emerson Dobroskay, 21 years old. Emerson was not your normal kid. While he was in high school, he studied astronomy at the University of Saskatoon. Yeah. And he got so good that at the age of 19, the university asked him to teach classes. Yeah. He finished undergrad in 3 years with a degree in physics. Not an easy thing to do. Well, he graduated and he wanted to study astronomy as a graduate student. He also wanted to study meteorology, and he was eagerly taken by the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. School was not hard for Emerson. He was one of these kids that was very humble, easy to get along with, very polite, never caused any issues. So, on October 28th, on October 27th, Emerson went out with some buddies after finals, and they went to a local bar that's still in existence called The Pit. Let me show you. So, like I said, all three sides of this is the university right here, is covered by the ocean. It juts out from Vancouver. And this area out here, real rural, thick. This is the university in here. It's all open out in here. During hot summer months, you'll see people on the beach all over this region. It's beautiful. For a urban location, you can't get much more gorgeous than this. So they went to the Pit. At about 12:30, 1 a.m. in the morning, Emerson and his buddies get out, and it's warm. And he's not wearing a coat. And they start heading to each other's dorms. They split up. Point of separation. He never made it back to his dorm. He was never seen again. Police went to his dorm, and they found exactly what they thought they'd find. A normal kid's room, young man's room. He had a couple of checks, had some cash sitting there. Nothing was unusual. They found his coat there. The RCMP put on a massive search around the university. Canines, helicopters, everything you can imagine was thrown at this. They searched the coast. They searched everywhere. Didn't find anything. So you got point of separation, you got water, you got a brilliant mind, you got a university setting, and you got drinking of alcohol. In Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, I wrote about all of these kids that are missing under these exact circumstances, coupled with brilliant individuals with a physics background that I've written about many times. And again, Emerson was that person. 3 years ago, Emerson's dad, who is now 78, was interviewed. And he said that he knew his son wouldn't have ran away. He knew his son was a hard worker, wanted to get ahead. And he said there were a lot of reports that someone looking like Emerson was seen in downtown Vancouver. Other people said he was in Seattle. A psychic said that he ran away and maybe living in Washington State somewhere. Another psychic said he was living under the floorboards in the Pit restaurant bar. This is Emerson. And he didn't wear his glasses all the time, but A brilliant mind. A good kid that got along with people. Hard to find at a real young age. Now, kind of getting the drift with where we're going on this segment. Mr. Dobroskay pled in this article that if anyone knows anything to please come forward. He was 78 years old. He didn't know how much longer he was going to live. And he just wanted to know what happened to his son. Keep that photo in your mind. Emerson Dobroskay, 21 years old in 1988. So, I've talked to you about a missing student from Miami University in Ohio, University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And now let's go over one province to Alberta, Canada. 1992, 19-year-old young man named Dean Mortensen. There's Dean. Very, very good soul. Missing January 24th, 1992. University of Alberta in Edmonton. He was from a city called Grande Cache, about 4 hours west. His dad was a coal miner. He was the oldest of 4 kids. Played hockey. Let's stop there. I thought that was a little interesting because Ron Tammen also had 4 kids in his family. But anyhow, Dean played hockey since he was 4 years old. He was a defenseman. On the campus at Alberta, there was a college called St. Joseph's, and he played for St. Joseph's College, and he wore number 55. He was very proud of that. He was a really good player, too. For people who don't know, to play defense on an adult team or on a college team or on a semi-pro team, the best skaters on the ice are defensemen. Why? Because you got to be able to keep up with their best skater skating forward and you're going backwards. Not an easy thing to do. And defensemen are super hard to find. Really good skating defensemen. Dean was one of them. So he went to his freshman year, first year, and he did real well. And then he came back, went on Christmas break, went home, had a great Christmas, returned January 6th. Everything was great, no problems. His friends said that on the wall of his dorm room, he lived in a one-room dorm, was a hockey poster of Steve Yzerman, playing for Detroit at the time. Yzerman wasn't a defenseman, but he was a real leader. He still is in the hockey world. His friends spoke of Dean in the terms of polite, humble, brilliant, respectful. He was the only kid in the whole dorm. They kind of made fun of him because he made his bed every night. Well, on January 22nd, records show that he withdrew $20 from an ATM machine, and he had $20 left in his account. On January 23rd, he went to school. After school, he went to the pub with some friends. The pub on campus was named The Ship. He was wearing his St. Joseph's hockey jersey, number 55, and he was wearing a Bantam Elks leather coat from Grande Cache, the city he was from. And on one sleeve it said defenseman, and on the other sleeve it had his name. And he was wearing faded blue jeans, Nike shoes, and a baseball cap. This is Dean. 6'1", 165, 6'1", 165 pounds. That night he had 2 drinks and maybe a shot. His friend said he was far, far, far from intoxicated. He was fine. He had class at 10:30 the next morning. So he and his friend left the bar, the ship, at about 10:30. They got outside, walked 20, 30 feet, and his friend said, "Hey, I forgot something in the bar. I got to go back." So his friend said he thought that Dean was going to wait for him. And when he came back out several minutes later, Dean was gone. Now, a couple of odd things about this. It was only 100 yards or so from where those two young men were standing to the front of Dean's dorm. It wasn't that far. Short distance. The next day, Dean had classes at 10:30. He didn't make them. And he missed 3. And he had 4 friends from Grand Cache. They were going to Alberta, the university. And they knew something was really wrong. That was just not like Dean. So they tried to get a hold of him everywhere they could. They couldn't. They got a hold of the RA assistant for the dorm. They went in his room. They determined that he hadn't slept in that bed that night. Nothing else was disturbed. And they started to search the area around where he went missing. They didn't find anything. And then they notified authorities. And there was a giant search. Huge search. They didn't find anything. Early reports in multiple newspaper articles said, "Oh, there's no foul play." They immediately said this, like multiple times. And they probably said this because the University of Alberta in Edmonton had almost no crime on campus. And this was all on campus. One of the detectives said that Dean was a very polite, calm soul, but at 6 feet tall and the size he carried and the shape he was in, he wasn't going to be an easy target for anybody. And he knew how to handle himself because of hockey. So, yeah. We stop there and I'll tell you a real kind of cool story. When Ben was 10 years old, he was playing on a Bantam team, young team. And for the San Jose Junior Sharks. And we got invited to go to a tournament in Edmonton. And same age kids. And the first game, our team skates out on the ice, and their team skates out on the ice from Edmonton. I kid you not. Those guys were like twice as big as our kids. I said, no. I was up in the stands. I told these guys, I said, this can't be a same age team. These guys are huge. And I think they beat us like 10-2 or 10-1 or something. And the hitting was horrendously hard. After the game, Ben said, he skated up and they were on a face-off. And he said, no, those kids were really nice. And I said, God, what do you guys eat, man? You're huge. They said, we don't eat, we drink beer. These guys were like 10 or 12 years old. And actually, at the end of the first game, Ben got the team award for the best player of the game. I think the size intimidated a lot of our players. It didn't intimidate Ben, and he just went right at him. He got creamed a couple times, but he kept getting up and just giving it back to him. It was awesome. But it was a great experience. Now, Ben was, just barely born in '93 when Dean disappeared. Getting back to that story. Years later, Dean's mom gave an interview, and she said, I know for a fact my son didn't run away. My son didn't take his life. My son didn't do something to separate himself from school. He was too interested in it. Words from an interested and committed mom. Well, every day, let me go back a sec here. On January 31st, so Dean disappeared on the 24th, on the 31st, a librarian is about 3/4 to a mile from where Dean disappeared. And she was getting into her car in an alleyway, and she finds Dean's hat. That is the hat they found in the alleyway. Now, you got to remember, this was the biggest news in Edmonton in years. Everybody knew. It was on TV, newspapers, everywhere. Everyone knew what to look for. This librarian found this hat. Now, let me give you the locations about where all this happened. So, this is the University of Edmonton right here. This is the North Saskatchewan River. So, they were at the drinks here at the ship. They leave the restaurant. They walk down a short distance, maybe a block. His buddy turns around, says, "I got to go back." Dean waits. His dorm is right here. It's almost no distance at all. The hat is found over here, about 3/4 of a mile to a mile away. This area is very, very thick and rural right through here. This is a bridge that goes over the North Saskatchewan. Kind of weird. You know what this reminds me of? Is I told you about the disappearance of a young man from just north of Minneapolis, St. Paul, in Anoka, Minnesota. I did a video about it. And he disappeared at a party. And this young man was a Division II soccer star. He disappears at the party, and then days later, they start finding his things in backyards in the area around where he disappeared. And then he's found in the golf course pond nearby. And the police detective said he didn't have any shoes on, and his socks were perfectly clean, and it was raining the night he disappeared. There's no way he could have gotten into the pond without dirtying his socks if he walked into the pond. So how did he get in the pond? That's, when I saw this, I immediately thought of that. So, Dean was never found. But I want you to look carefully at how close the Saskatchewan River is to this incident. Or how about the ocean in the Dobroskay case? Or how about 4 Mile Creek in the Tammen case? Yeah. It bothered me that so many police in Edmonton kept pushing there's no foul play. So, January 24th is Dean Mortensen Day at St. Joseph's College at the university. And every January 24th, everybody at that school hangs their jerseys out the window in honor of Dean. He's never been found. Nobody knows what happened. But think about this. He had been drinking. He wasn't intoxicated. He was an athlete. He was in phenomenal shape. And we have that point of separation, and we have water. How many times am I going to sit here and tell you the same replicating facts until somebody wakes up somewhere and they say, "Hey, Paulides is onto something"? It's amazing to me that nobody wants to acknowledge of what's going on. Now, in this instance, we have disappearances in 92, 88, and 53. Now, 88 to 92, that's a 4-year span. Different provinces. One's British Columbia, one's Alberta. It's like in different states for the US. Then you got Tammen going back to 53. But in one of my books, I've got a lot of stories about co-eds who vanished. Now, for some reason, if I wrote a lot of stories about missing females, people would say, "Oh yeah, she was kidnapped and blah, blah, blah." But you can't really say that about young men. You don't really see that happening to young men, especially in schools and in locations that have almost zero crime. Now, In Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, I wrote about many of these cases. A lot of them were in Wisconsin. A lot of them were in Minnesota. All of them around water. A lot of times the bodies were found in water. And the results were always the same. All of these facts I just gave to you were in all of those stories. And they're very hit and miss. The only replication is the facts surrounding the specific cases. So between Dobroskay and Mortensen, you can see the extreme similarities here. They both went to a bar. They both disappeared at about the same time, 12:30 or 1. Both of them left the bar. Both of them were going back to their dorms. Both of them were good, clean-cut kids working hard. Now, some of you have given me a difficult time about this, but I don't care, because it's more important that we get the facts straight. I don't care if the person was an out-of-luck, poor person living in the crappiest house in a city and disappeared. If it matched the facts, I'd be writing about it. But let's get the facts straight. I can't even find any of those. If I did, I'd write about them. The people that are homeless, living next to a river with no heat, little food. I don't read about those people disappearing. I don't find those people. I don't hear about them disappearing. It's these people that I keep writing about. And one person said to me, Dave, it's almost like these people would offer the biggest challenge to something that wanted to take them. Big, strong, young, smart, little alcohol. Yeah. Could be. I don't know. But I won't back off from the facts. So I picked these 3 cases for a reason. They're all real similar, number one. Mortensen was 19. Ron Tammen was 19. Dobroskay was 21. It's a pretty tight range of ages. I couldn't find, and this is true, I could not find one negative thing in the background of any of these young men when I dug into them for weeks. The only thing I found was Ron Tammen. They did a background check on him at one point, and they found he got a ticket one time in Miami for going 8 miles over the speed limit, right through the middle of the university. I thought, that's it? That's not bad. But no, nobody else, nothing. Again, folks, it bothers me. I remember when I got done doing the Tammen case, Ben and I were sitting in my hotel room. He goes, what did you find out, Dad? I told him about the whole case. He goes, what did you think? What do you think is going on? I go, I don't know. I don't know. It's bothersome. But I appreciate you being here. And when you watch this, I want you to think about that. This whole scenario I just gave you. What is the applicability of the fish in Ron Tammen's bed? I've never heard of another case like that. I have no idea what it means. I've thought that, well, maybe whoever did that knew that Ron would have to leave his room and go get new sheets, and maybe while he was gone they could have been there, but that's stupid, because if they were already in the room, they were in the room. They didn't need a time to get back in. It's one of those weird facts I've always thought about. I got a ton of emails about my friend and seeing the faces melt and the cars driving by with nobody in it. I don't know if I'll ever get to all those emails. I got way too many to ever read. So thank you. I forwarded probably 70 of them to my friend. And I know you said, wow, Dave, thanks. Those really helped. So thank you. I'm still very interested in stories coming out of the wilderness. I've gotten a few from park rangers. Thank you. And many from search and rescue. Thank you. You guys know that I'll never give you up. And because I have author's privilege, I will never say anything about who you are or where I got the information, as long as it keeps coming, and I think everyone recognizes it by now. Appreciate the confidence and the support. That's really the only way it's going to help these breaking issues. So, if YouTube allows, I'll be here next time. Thanks again. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video. Make sure you're a subscriber. I get tons of comments from people who aren't subscribing. Please subscribe. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.